Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Anna, I live and work in Paris, and my channel is usually about Paris and France, but I went on holiday to New York and I wanted to record a few vlogs and videos about this. And I have never actually felt so Parisian as I did during this week in New York. I was with my friends who both live on Upper West Side and who showed me around, and when we were walking around New York, I always made these comparisons with Paris. Like, oh, in New York they have High Line, and in Paris we have Le Coulee Verte, and in Paris it's baguette, and in London it's bagel, and in New York it's Central Park, and in Paris it's Tuileries and other gardens and parks, and so on. So I decided to sum up my impressions and comparisons and culture shocks in a video. So let's get started if you want to know more about a Parisian girl's impressions in New York. So first thing that impressed me is how huge everything is. New York is a big city, but it's also enormous. It's so large and tall, starting from the buildings and finishing with the foods portions. And even now, I'm on the 33rd floor at my friend's house, which is unimaginable in Paris. And it's both impressive and oppressing in a way. I could hardly imagine myself being relaxed in New York City. Then it's not only huge and tall, it's also intense in all possible meanings. You can feel it even in little details. Like, for example, I saw a couple of times a line of live news going on a little screen on the building, or live TV news in a taxi behind the front seat, or in a way that people walk and speak and behave. Everything is very loud, and there is this constant hustle in the background. Next thing is that New Yorkers have a very different relationship with time. They've got no time to lose. And again, you feel it in every detail of everyday life, how they work, how they walk, how they get lunch. Like, for example, that's part of an American work culture, but people wouldn't go out for a long lunch break. They would just grab something on the go, like a sandwich, and eat at their desk. And it's usually in the food trucks, and there are many of them in New York. Whereas in Paris, we would take a really 1 hour long break and maybe go gather with your colleagues in the office or outside, or sit on the terrace, maybe take a glass of wine, and take our time. And this is pretty much French approach of and way of living and slowing down, and art de vivre, which is the art of living. And in New York, everything is just too fast and too intense to do that. Or for example, I was standing on the crossroads with my friend, and we were just chatting before crossing the street, and a guy behind us was like, "Oh, let's get going." He was annoyed by the fact that we were too slow, and I do get annoyed by tourists sometimes in Paris, but I wouldn't yell in that way. Or, for example, I tried to go on a date in New York, and I matched with a guy on an app, and he said, "Okay, so what do you want? Would it be a holiday fling? And because I'm not going to be a free tour guide, and let's get this holiday thing started fast because I'm only available tomorrow at 7 p.m." Whoa, that was way too fast and too American as an approach. My friend actually mentioned that one of the possible explanations is that many people in New York are paid per hour. So they have a very different attitude to time. An hour not worked is an hour not paid, and they don't have the time to waste on other things. And here we're probably getting into more of a difference between French and American culture overall, and it's not only about New York and Paris. But you can feel the intense and fast-paced rhythm of the city here in New York much more than you can feel it in Paris. And it always makes me laugh when people say that Paris is intense and tiresome and too busy and everyone's like running around. After living in Moscow, I always laughed at this, but now in New York, I've seen it another different level of intensity and pressure of a city. Next interesting point that amazed me is that you have to be assertive to be polite. I read about this in a small book I've seen in the Met, in the Metropolitan Museum Library. That was about New York's etiquette and rules. And one of the things said, actually, you have to be assertive to be, if you want to be polite. For example, if someone is taking too much space on the at the exit of a train in the metro or something like that, you would be like, you'd tap on his shoulder and say, "Sorry, we all need to use this." Or same goes for the signaling on the street between the cars and things like that. And also, if you are lost, for example, and you want to ask for directions, you should cut all the crap like, "Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Would you be so kind to help me, please? Where is Canal Street?" Just cut all that and get straight to the "where is that street?" Uh, because I would always do all these phrases in the beginning, and people would definitely look at me like annoyed, because again, they've got no time to lose. In New York, I heard a lot of people saying, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm all good. How are you? Thank you." In like one line, and I also thought that in France, asking "ça va" and saying "ça va" is just a formality, and it was already annoying for me. But here, it's different yet again. In France, the "ça va" can be an opener for a chit chat with someone who's doing you a service, for example, or with your colleague. Here is just a polite line. "Hi, how are you doing? I'm all good, thank you." And that's it. And the small talk, well, this is part of my Russian culture. We're really not good at small talk. So if someone asks, "How are you?" We actually expect you to answer. Maybe not tell your whole life, but give an approximate answer of how you are. And we wouldn't do it to people we don't really care about. Here it's very different. So you would always start anything like, "Hey, how are you doing?" and not expecting an answer to that. Speaking of providing a service here in New York, and that again maybe is generally American, is really, really good. People are very polite and welcoming, and because they mostly live on tips you would give them. So, by the way, do not forget to give tips between 15 and 25% if you got a personal service. So, for example, you would get in a restaurant and a waiter would be like, "Hey, I'm Anna. I'm going to be your waiter today. How's it going?" and stuff. And in Paris, when you get in a restaurant, a waiter is actually doing you a service and an honor by serving you. So it's actually very different. Next point that I was not expecting actually is how green New York is. So it's this huge city, this jungle of glass and concrete, and yet at the same time there is a lot of green spaces. There are a lot of trees on the streets, and this is actually very agreeable and very nice. And we definitely missed that a bit in Paris, so that surprised me. And I'm not talking about only the Central Park. Next, Manhattan is actually surprisingly easy to navigate. I thought that I would definitely get lost because I don't know anything about New York. I've never been here before. But on Manhattan, since it's built in a specific way, and as my architect friend put it, it's an architectural phenomenon. It was built around Central Park, so you have the Central Park in the middle, and all the avenues and streets that go perpendicular to it. They have numbers, and so it's pretty easy to actually get around. New Yorkers I've met would describe them first as New Yorkers and then as Americans. So this is probably a common point with Paris, because in Paris people really do make a distinction between Parisians and all other French people. And all others hate them and think they're arrogant and snobbish and rude. I don't know what Americans think about New Yorkers, but I do know that New Yorkers kind of set themselves apart from the rest of the country, saying they're first New Yorkers. Speaking of which, another point is that New York is a very, very multicultural city, as much as America is a multicultural country. However, I feel that today it sounds really hypocrite, mainly because moving to America today is extremely complicated. Staying here as an immigrant is extremely complicated. You have a lot of barriers. And unless you do a STEM degree and you're an engineer or a consultant or a banker, it would be very hard for you to get your work visa and your green card. It's not like 50 years ago anymore. And the country is not really welcoming immigrants for different jobs. So it's quite hard, and I find the whole speech of the United States welcomes people from all around the world, and this is where you can build your American dream. And it's not really exactly the case today if you don't have American citizenship. So this is a parenthesis because my business is all about studies abroad and careers abroad, and I would always warn my clients about the United States, saying that it's very complicated to stay if this is your goal. One last funny point I noticed as a Parisian is that in New York I discovered the concept of doorman, which can seem close to what in Paris we call gardien or gardienne. But do not get mistaken, it's not the same at all, because in New York, the doorman is here to provide you service with care, to welcome you home, to deliver your packages, to provide you safety, and to overall facilitate your life. Whereas in Paris, you are more in the service of the gardienne, and you got to be very careful and how you act around her or him and make them happy so that they would provide you better service and actually help you. So well, that was on a funny side comparing New York and Parisian lifestyle. So that was on a funny side. So that's everything I wanted to share with you guys as my impressions of a Parisian here in New York. And I made a vlog that I already posted before about week travel here in New York and the highlights I've seen and the places I recommend you to visit if you come. And I know there's still a lot to see that I keep for the next time. And now it's time for me to go, and I'm leaving New York right now to get my flight back to Paris. And I hope you like this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next videos from Paris.